What's up, everybody? Today I wanted to come on here and I wanted to talk about the LA Clippers because this season the Clippers have to be one of the most disappointing teams in recent basketball history, if not the most disappointing. Coming into the season, a lot of people were picking the Clippers to win the NBA Finals this year, and they were probably the favorites to win the Finals this year up until maybe a week and a half ago. But they did not win the Finals. They blew a 3-1 lead in the second round to the Denver Nuggets, and just overall in the playoffs they did not look like the team that everybody thought that they were going to be. If we go back to last season, the Clippers were a 48-win team, and they surprisingly in the first round of the playoffs as the 8th seed took the Golden State Warriors all the way to 6 games, and that team had no stars on it. That team was led by Danilo Gallinari, Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, and Pat Bev. And yeah, it was a really surprising season. And so going into the offseason, the thought was if they get a star, they could be a really, really good team next year. And so they made the huge splash and ended up going out and signing Kawhi Leonard, who was just coming off a historic season. He won the NBA Finals with Toronto Raptors, won Finals MVP. And not only just that, the Clippers went out and they made a huge, huge trade for Paul George to get a second star on the team. They ended up giving Oklahoma City Danilo Gallinari, who's a crazy good scorer, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who he looks like he's going to be a future All-Star, and a ton of draft picks also with that. And so even though they gave up that much, they looked like they had a really, really stacked team. You know, they kept Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams coming off the bench, which is crazy good off the bench. They had two of the best two-way players in basketball, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They have Patrick Beverley, who's pretty much the heart and soul of the team. And they have good depth all around. You know, you have Landry Shamet, who's a really good shooter off the bench. JaMychal Green, who's going to come off the bench and be that stretch four that you need to stretch the floor when you have Montrezl Harrell and Ivica Zubac on the floor. And then you have Ivica Zubac, who they re-signed the last offseason, and he's a good role-playing center. So the thought was that the team is going to be really, really good, which pretty much did. The team was really good, except for when we got to the playoffs. The first round of the playoffs, they ended up facing the Mavericks, and a lot of people thought the Clippers weren't going to really have that much of a struggle against the Mavericks. But the Mavericks came out and looked really good. Luka Doncic got his numbers, as he always does, and Kristaps Porzingis ended up missing most of the series. He got ejected in Game 1. He got ended up missing most of the series because of an injury. And also on the Clippers side, Paul George came out and played terrible. He shot the ball terrible. He was getting clowned on social media. And the Clippers ended up barely winning the series in 6 games. It was a lot closer of a series than people thought it was going to be. So then, second round of the playoffs, end up getting matched up against the Denver Nuggets, who just came off a crazy 3-1 series deficit, which they came back from against the Utah Jazz. And the Clippers ended up getting off to a really good start in the series. They took a commanding 3-1 lead, but then this is where things start to go wrong. The Clippers have to win one of the last 3 games in the series to move on to the Western Conference Finals, and they lost. They blew a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets, but also props to the Nuggets because they have a really good team over there. You know, Jokic does his thing every time he's on the floor. Probably the best passing big man ever, honestly. Jamal Murray is going to come out, and he actually struggled in the series, but in Game 7 he came out and put up crazy numbers. Michael Porter Jr. looks like he's going to be really good in the next few years, and they have awesome depth too. You know, you got veteran Paul Millsap, you got really good contributors, Gary Harris, Jeremy Grant, Monte Morris off the bench. They got a really good team, and they beat the Clippers in 7 games. So for now, we don't know what the future of the Clippers is going to look like. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George both have player options after next season. So after next season, if the Clippers don't win, they could be completely screwed, because after giving up all those assets, going all in on this year, giving up all those picks for Paul George, a pick for Marcus Morris, all these assets that we gave up, the Clippers could be looking really bad in the next few years if they leave. The Clippers have a lot of pressure, even more pressure than they did this season, to win next season, because if they don't win next season and Kawhi and PG leave, the Clippers could be in a world of trouble. And also that trade with Oklahoma City, if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander turns out to be the star that OKC is banking on him being, and they hit on those draft picks that the Clippers gave them, that could turn out to be one of the worst trades ever in the NBA, because they just gave up so much for Paul George. And to not win and the two stars leave the team next season, it could be looking very bad for the Clippers. Also, we don't know about Montrezl Harrell. Montrezl Harrell could leave the team this upcoming offseason, and he can never be a Clipper again. Same with Marcus Morris. Marcus Morris is a free agent this offseason, and the Clippers gave up draft picks for him. So, also, we don't know what's going to happen with Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers, this season, people sort of came to realize that maybe he's not the coach everybody thought he was. You know, the thought about Doc Rivers is that he's been this great coach, but a lot of Doc Rivers teams have underperformed now. And if Kawhi and Paul George leave and the Clippers don't win next season, the next 5 to maybe 8 years for the Clippers could be terrible. And that's just how it is. It's going to be really hard for people like myself to be a Clipper fan for the next 5 to 8 years if that does happen, because there's no young assets almost. Landry Shamet and Zubats are like the only 2 young guys that we have for a while, and that's really it. I mean, the Clippers could be in serious trouble. And yeah, that's it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. This is ENT Basketball. Hope you enjoyed the video, and peace out.